Welcome back, everybody. Do take a seat. Hope you all enjoyed lunch. Hope you all managed to do some networking and all went to the demo stations. Demo stations will be open later as well, but now we've got a quick, intense shift through to cocktails. So just think of that at the end of the road. I am. So welcome back. As I say, we're now got another keynote, Mobiles and Brands, new BFF, Best Friends Forever, question mark. We will soon find out. And presenting that, we have Chris Arnold, founder of Creative Orchestra and more recently Komobi 2. And he'll share us best practices that brands have adopted to unleash the potential that mobile presents when you marry technology, data, and people, three core elements. So prior to Creative Orchestra, Chris was board director and creative director at Saatchi & Saatchi before setting up Feel, the UK's first ethical marketing and advertising agency. So over to Chris, and please all be fully involved in the after-lunch session. Thank you.
Right, so I've got the graveyard spot, so my job now is, it's like food for thought. You've had the food, now I'm going to give you the thought. It's a very good question, this one, actually, is, are they best friends forever? I think, firstly, my question is, forever, I think, is a bit ambitious. Best friends, certainly. But how many of you guys have got teenage kids here? Anybody hands up? I got teenage. How many of you know their language? Do you also know what BFF also means? Any suggestions? Big fat fuck. Oh, I thought that'd wake you up. There's equally much chance that you can be your best friend of your customer, but you could also be equally the most hated person on the planet. And I think we've already had a chat about ad blocking this morning. I'll bring that up a bit later, actually. So I think the real key thing here is if you want to be the best friend of the mobile, that's great. But what you're really aiming for is to be the best friend of actually your customers, actually. So we know that every brand wants to be in the mobile space. There's no doubt about that. It's the place where they want to be because they believe that's where we are. And when you consider that almost more than half of us now are using the mobile far more than the desktop to actually get things, and the sort of growth of things like people using it in shopping and out and about is enormous, it's not surprising every brand wants to be there. If you look at digital overall and look at marketing disciplines from brand advertising to all the rest, and direct marketing and sales promotion, you'll find that a lot of the positive results that come out, for example, like Facebook and Twitter, are very promotionally led. If you look at the main reason people talk about advertising, for example, the biggest reason actually is often about great ads on TV, followed by promotional activity. The biggest reason people sign up to Facebook and Twitter for brands is often to get the promotional stuff. So we know that promotions work. So it's not surprising that in the retail space, this is one area that brands really want to be in. They want to actually be there when you're out there shopping. And I'll give you some figures on that in a second. It's interesting that we actually have more people own a mobile on the planet than actually own a toothbrush, which is fascinating. And there is no app for brushing your teeth yet. So all you app developers out there, there is a massive opportunity here to be had. So you want to think about that. There are over 37 million smartphones in the UK. That's probably already 38, then it'll be 39. It's just growing rapidly, and most of us own one. And it's quite amazing how many of us do. It will count apparently 70% of media consumption. And it's certainly, 70% of mobile searches resulted in an action. One of the biggest drivers, interestingly, of searches on mobile is, when we're in the retail environment, is actually outdoor posters, for example. They're driving a lot of people into actually being tipped into search. Okay, so what is our relationship like with the mobile? Well, I got up this morning, I was woken up by my alarm clock on my mobile. I actually checked my emails, I checked my Facebook and my Twitter before I even got out of bed. I am that sad. I actually then looked on to see what the weather was like. I then went into the bathroom, I put on the radio, and then checked the train timetables, and then I went out the door, and while I was on there, I was checking my emails again. I must have used it 10 times before I even left the house on various ways. So we are actually now so addicted to our mobile, it's actually quite ridiculous. And here's a couple of fascinating figures. 6% of people would rather give up alcohol than their mobile. How many people would give up alcohol rather than their mobile in here? Come on, you're all media guys. Didn't think many. How many would give up sex? How many actually are having any sex because you're too busy on the mobile? Well, 75% of women admit devices are ruining their relationship. Now, you women are saying, oh, no, they're not. A lot of that is reference to blokes, by the way. How many girls go out and about and the guy's on the mobile the whole time? And that really annoys you, hands up. Yes, quite a few of you. It is becoming an annoying thing. If I pull out the mobile when I'm watching TV, my wife just takes it out of my hand and puts it down. She says, you're here with me, not with that mobile. And it is interesting. There's a lot of studies showing that, in fact, the mobile is causing friction in relationships. But at the same time, you do get couples who actually quite enjoy mobiles. The freakiest thing is when you go into a pub these days and you see people standing there and nobody's talking to each other, all just like this. And you think, is that really the future of communications? But ironically, on the other side, when you start up things like Facebook sites, and I started out one that became quite big, the thing that happened very quickly was people started saying, can we have an eyeball? Can we actually meet with each other? Can we actually see each other? We want human contact. And human beings are hardwired to actually want to meet people face to face. That's why more of you are here than sitting in the office watching this on a webcam. It's certainly the most used for accessing the internet. And nowadays with 4G, we're using it continually and all the time, actually. And eBay sells a product every 2 seconds via mobiles. That's quite a fascinating thing. We are shopping more and more. Although, interesting enough, there is some interesting data that challenges a little bit of what we think about actually retail from the government. So our normal rational use of certainly mobiles is very functional. We're using it for a lot of very functional things, which is great. And more we're using it for shopping. Although I can't get my Apple Pay to work, so if someone wants to help me with that later, I'm open to invites. We're using it for entertainment. We're using it a lot to fill the time as well. People say there's interesting studies into us saying we're all time poor. We don't have enough time. Reality is we're actually filling that time with things on the mobile. And that's why we say we're time poor. We're not actually really time poor. We're just using our time possibly badly, or we're just filling it up with all the things we do. But if you look at emotionally, and this is the more interesting thing I find actually, is when you look at emotionally, is to connect with others. That's a primary DNA of human beings. It's to escape. It's to share, to know. It's something we can do when we have a moment of complaint. My son texts me more when he's got something to complain about than when he's got something to talk about positive. I mean, I get this, went to Finsbury Park this morning, bloody hell, they closed the barriers again. So I've become this kind of therapy via mobile, which is at least I have in communication with my son, I suppose. It's a great way of capturing memories. I mean, I went to a rock concert recently of King Crimson. Anybody remember King Crimson, or are you too young? Okay. Well, they told us at the beginning we were not allowed to use our mobiles in the concert. Now, the average age of people at King Crimson were 40 plus. And they were going, excuse me, you know, this is 2015. And so people took their cameras out and they were filming. And people literally were sent into the audience to tell people to stop filming and taking pictures. And it was like, this is unbelievable. This is like 1970, which is when the ban was around. In fact, I recently wrote a complaint because they then went and took down all the videos off YouTube. I mean, this is really a bad customer relationship when you consider that a band's money comes from its fans. But, you know, for these people, they knew that this is probably the last time they'll see this old legendary band. They're probably going to be dead in 5 years. You know, if you went to see the Rolling Stones, who surprisingly aren't dead, you know, I don't know how they keep going, you would actually want to capture that moment, wouldn't you? To be told you can't is offensive now. So, you know, the mobile is, you know, a really important part of our lives of capturing pictures, even if it is sad selfies or holidays now. You know, it's replaced the camera. It's a place to be, you know, it's where we can be smarter, we can gain information and knowledge. We use it a lot to find things out. And basically, it's a great time filler. So the thing about mobiles is not to look at them just functionally, but to look at what they do emotionally. I look at people from the customer-centric point of view. So I deal a lot in my day-to-day working with clients, trying to take the customer point of view, the customer-centric, and understanding the psychology of how they work. Now, there's a phrase called ergo-psychonomics. Right? Now, are you familiar with the word ergonomics, which is about how we physically interact with spaces? Ergo-psychonomics is about the psychology of how we interact with things. And that is very true with mobile. It's interesting to understand how we actually interact with the psychology of a mobile and how it plays in our lives. And in fact, when you start talking about advertising and content and publishing and information, which is one of the big users, it's interesting to understand how that works. It's quite a complicated area, and you could spend the next hour just talking about that alone. But it's very well to understand the psychology of that and not to just assume that we use it in irrational. There's a great phrase, which is technology has to find a human need to succeed. And this is really true, that if you look at a lot of technology, its reason for failure is because there wasn't a need for it in the first place. And we did a study with an eminent psychologist and a historian, and we looked at the Roman society when it got to its peak. We said, what if you drop the internet and digital into their world? How would that actually perform? What would people like and dislike? And interesting enough, all the things that were successful today would have been successful then. Pornography, because the Romans loved sex. You know, communicating with each other, spying and selling, you know, all these things. And war games, because they like killing, well, chucking Christians to the lions, you know. So they wouldn't have had World of Warcraft, more throwing Christians to lions. So you have to find a need. All those things that have failed, that we registered, would have failed in the same society. So it's very interesting. Our human basic needs don't change. So I always say to people, get back to the basic psychology. And psychologists say we're now older than 7 years old underneath, which would explain why Angry Birds is so bloody successful. Because it is a very simple game. Now, the big area that a lot of brands I said are going into is the retail sector, and proximity mobile marketing or proximity marketing is a really big thing in the States, and it's an area that's potentially could be £9 billion soon. It's an area where more and more what people are doing is not just seeing the mobile as a friend, but how that links up with local technologies, not just with geo-targeting, but actually with technologies like BLE, with NFC and Wi-Fi, or with Li-Fi. Anyone familiar with Li-Fi? Li-Fi is a new technology which is using light instead of sound and signals. So what they do is you have light coming down, so you sit underneath it, and it's the same as Wi-Fi, but it's very, very narrow. So if you're sitting in a cafe, you have to sit within the light zone. And they've done that in certain countries because the Wi-Fi clash now is getting so bad that in fact, it's having an effect. So Li-Fi is a fantastic new technology. They're using it in supermarkets now as well, experimenting in America. So there's a lot of new technologies coming on that allow us, and basically RFIDs as well, which is kind of same as NFCs, but they're broader. So you can actually know when someone walks in and actually click them because their loyalty card has triggered a little device as you walk through the supermarket door. And now you can actually communicate to them through the mobile, knowing they're there, as well as using geo-targeting. The problem with geo-targeting sometimes is that once they're into the supermarket, you can lose them because of the signal. Because basically supermarkets act like Faraday cages and block signals. This is a fact from the government, right? It's not from anybody who has an agenda to sell you digital or sell you anything else or stuff. It's a fact from the government research. 88.5% of retail spend is where consumers shop, eat, drink, have fun, and socialize, offline. That is changing. But the point is, where we're also using online, especially on mobile more, is that that shopping process is often using the mobile. We're going out there and we're pre-shopping. Now, a very clever thing that Carpetride did recently was that they knew a lot of people were pre-shopping for carpets online, and they grabbed those people. And when they saw through geo-targeting that they were in a competitor's shop, they basically SMS'd the signal to them saying, hey, we've got a special offer, why don't you come into Carpetride? So they literally put their shop in their competitor's shop. That's a very clever use of mobile, and a way that, presumably with an opt-in consumer, they welcome the message. You know, they were off in someone like Harvey's, and suddenly it's like, hey guys, let's go next door, we can get something cheaper. So it's a very clever, quite cheeky way of using the mobile, but they were basically connecting up bits. So the big challenge that really is the thing, it's not just about brands, you know, treating the mobile as their best friend, it's actually about the link of the three together, the consumer, the actual technology, and the brand itself. How those three work together is actually critical. What a lot of people forget is they kind of miss this bit out on the right and think it's all just about being best friends, assuming that if they're good on the mobile, they'll win customers. They won't. They could easily make a big enemy of their customers. And if you see how some brands have destroyed relationships on digital, I mean, good examples of Groupon, who totally destroyed their relationship with consumers through texting on digital and also through emails. You know, they started as a liked brand and ended up as one of the most hated. So you have to be very careful. So the old mantra of all media has always been the right place, the right time, and more importantly, the right frame of mind. There is no point talking to people when they're in the wrong frame of mind. It becomes basically intrusive, and that's really important. Now, there's a word we tend to use a lot in this industry, which is also used by people in warfare, is targeting. Think about it. If I say, targeting in warfare is like sending a missile to somewhere and blowing it up. You know, is that really the way we should be looking at consumers? I'll give you a good example, actually. If you're in a bar, there's three guys in a bar, and one of them says, you know what, we're single guys, you know, I really would like a long-term relationship, get married and have kids. And then you've got the laddish one who says, screw that, you know, let's go target those women at the bar. Now, how many women in this room would like to know they were a target? Anybody? Don't see a lot of women's hands up. Now, if you were in a shop and you heard the sales assistant say as you walked in, oh, there's one, let's go target her or him, that doesn't make you feel very valuable, does it? So the language we use is actually not a good starting point psychologically. We shouldn't talk about our consumers as targets. What we should do is to try and words that are more friendly and respectful and partnership style. In the world of retail, you don't train your sales staff to talk about people coming through the door as targets. You're talking about as customers, and the importance for training sales staff is about engagement. So what marketing needs to do in the retail space, and in the proximity space, is to think how retailers talk to their customers, not think about how we often do, which is just to target people and just throw them ads in the hope that somehow they're going to respond. So just because you can doesn't mean it's right. There's a phrase, rude marketing. This is christened in America. It was actually a retailer commenting on BLE. Now, iBeacons, BLE, they are really popular at the moment in trial at the moment. They've been tried everywhere. Lots of retailers are trialing them out. But one retailer said his problem with BLE was The way it was being used, which isn't necessarily the way it can be used, was being used in an offensive manner. It was like having an offensive salesperson who was in your face. He said, that is not good for my business. He said, basically, they're rude because they interrupt you and they send you a message that basically outweighs the positivity of that message. So the key thing is, you have to ask yourself, is the messaging being rude? Is it actually not polite? Is it the way you'd want to be talked to? And there's a lot of advertising, unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons we've got suffering from ad blockers, is because it is blatantly rude. So it's a really good thing to use. I think this is a great term. I want to see this term used a lot more, actually. It's better than using things like spam and junk, because it kind of has a more human element to it. So this question, which I know you've been talking about this morning as well, and we'll go on throughout the whole of this industry, and the whole fact that in America they're getting very into this idea of sustainable advertising. Are we under threat? I've always been a champion to say, as a creative person, that we do need to do decent ads that respect consumers. We need to do good creative ads because they engage more. Now, there are times and places where functionality is the need. If I'm really just looking for information, I don't necessarily need an ad that's clever and creative. But I do sometimes, if I'm not, need something that at least gives me some reward for watching or absorbing or clicking through. And it's in the interest of publishers to do what some publishers are doing already, which just says, we ain't going to run that. Now, I was talking to someone at one of the TV channels saying, when someone comes along and wants to run a bad TV ad, we try to do our damnedest not to let them do it. We try and put them off because that just offends our audience, and we don't want our audiences offended. We want to encourage them to do better ads. So more or not, we'll try and send them back to do a better ad. And I think that's the interest. Some of the print publishers will not let you run an ad if it doesn't fit in with the quality of the magazine. That's a brave position to take, but I think the only way we are really going to stop those brands that do rubbish ads is to actually start with the publishers and their agents saying, no, you can't run that. We're not going to take that. Or you charge a premium for bad advertising. The problem we do have is the economics. Where you've got systems that are cheaper to put media out, clients don't want to spend the money investing. TV is expensive, so they'll invest in creativity. In a lot of digital cases, they won't invest the time or the money in it. So there's a challenge, and a big challenge to be faced. So basically, wrong place, wrong time, wrong frame of mind. Consumers hate bad ads. 83% apparently is a figure. And that is a really significant bit of research. I think that's Nielsen, actually. So we have to take the fact that we are in a real kind of crux moment that really it's not just about doing ads because they're effective. It's about doing ads because they're going to kill us all off if we're not careful. And wrong creative. Now, creativity is 70% of the effectiveness of advertising. Now, as a creative director, I didn't make that up. That is actually both Nielsen and Google's figures. They said they're concerned that 30% is largely targeting and media channels, and 70% is the creativity. That creativity can be defined in many ways. That might be highly creative like Gorilla, or it might be something like just a very, very good how-to video, which apparently are very popular with mums at the moment on learning how to do things. So you have to actually think very carefully about, the fact that it's the most important. What we tended to see, and this is a good example from direct marketing, you had the syndrome where as targeting improved, clients spent less on creativity. They thought that targeting was an alternative to creativity. And then what they saw was the results didn't change. So after 30 years of improved targeting in direct marketing, they don't get any better results. And the reason for that is because they downed the creative. If they'd kept the creative high and the targeting up, they would have got twice the results. It's a very simple bit of sort of mathematics, So engagement is all about the 3 R's: respect, relationship, and relevance. Relevance is a thing we've used for years. It hasn't changed. Relationships is key, and respect. This is something which a lot of people say advertising doesn't do. Women say that 91% of ads don't understand them and don't respect them. Women hate ads that patronize women in kitchens saying, oh, hello, darling, I wonder how she stays so slim. It must be that yogurt. And that's, we did a load of work at Mumsnet. People hate those ads. They really hate them. They find them patronizing. So why do we run them? So, and this is a very interesting fact that 80% of customers want to engage with brands, but we don't let them. How often? The best we usually get is a feedback. People actually want to have input. They want to be able to shape brands. They want to input on brands. They want to be able to comment. They want to be listened to. And that is one of the most important bits of engagement. We can do that digitally. We can do it at a drop of a hat instantly. Yet how many brands do it? We're missing a massive opportunity here. So we're all in search of the ultimate science fiction dream, which is actually a future where computers can do it all. Well, thankfully, I don't think they'll ever replace the creative because you can never forget the human element, actually. And I think, as much as Daleks look fantastic, the Doctor Who always seems to outdo them every time, doesn't he? Because he's always a bit smarter. And the human element is really, really key, actually. You need to be customer-centric, not tech-centric. I mean, even people at Google say you've got to start with the people, not with the technology. I've seen so many people come saying, we want to use this technology. You say, yes, but how? You've got to understand the consumer. Is this technology relevant? Is it even going to do the job you want? Or maybe there's a better way of doing it. So it's not a mindset of man versus machine, but man and machine working together. I mean, one of the interesting things, I speak at quite a few retail conferences, actually, one of the chaps at the back there recognized me from Richmond's conference, is that a lot of technology in retail has become kind of got exhausted. They don't, you know, they've done all the big screens and the interactive screens. They've kind of got, so well, they're really expensive for us to run, and you know, we have all this regular content we have to pay for and all the technology, and they've gone back to good old-fashioned iPads, tablets. This is what the retailers love at the moment. That's their choice of technology. It's cheap, it's updatable, it's easy, but it improves the customer service. And one retailer said, we're getting rid of most of the technology and we're just hiring more staff, and we're giving them all a tablet. That means we can turn our little shop into a warehouse, because with that tablet, we can go to any customer and we can say, look, you can have this and this and this, and we have all these accessories. So they're improving the shopper's experience through better interaction. So they're using the human and technology element, not just the technology. That's really key. Put technology in the hands of good people and you will just amplify the effect massively. So human relationships is very important. 5 roles of engagement. Think human, consumer insight, psychology. If you haven't got good insight, then you're not going to understand people, and that means understanding psychology. We do a lot of work with NLP and Enneagrams and other things. One of the things to differentiate between is insight is not observation. Observation is observing. Insight is understanding. So you might see lots of people do something, but you don't understand why they're doing it. You need to understand the why to have insight. Observation is not insight, and that's the danger of some data. We often make the measurable important, not the important measurable. So what will often happen is we'll say, well, we observed this. So what does that mean? Well, we don't understand. But often clients will jump at it and say, well, we did this, got a reaction, boom. It's the danger of real time can be that you don't have time to understand, and you need to make time to understand. So even if you're running real-time ads where you might run 4 at once, and the one that gets the best clicks for you keep running, you should seek to understand why, because that means you can improve it for the next time. It can also be, I mean, we are complicated things. The human mind is so complicated, and none of us think the same at different times of day. We can be that aggressive buyer in the office buying procurement, and then be the sweetest person in the evening in the shop buying something from the corner shop. You know, we can swap around and move around, our dynamics change, and we can be a very tight-fisted buyer in one environment and just throwing money away. With studies of shoppers have found that women who've gone around shops being tight-fisted, you know, like I'm only going to buy the cheapest here, cheapest there, will often spend what they've saved on an indulgence at the end. You know, so they'll buy a bit of chocolate at the end that costs more than they actually saved. That's quite a fascinating little insight. To use the join and join the dots, it's the fact that we've got a lot of data we can join, but it's knowing what to join. I mean, if you look at it from this point of view, you know, here could be seen as 1,000 different million dots. And if you look at our ancient history, what they did is they created images in the sky and it became astrology. But you say, okay, so you can join those dots and that shows you that direction. But if you join the dots another way, it shows the other direction. We can go in lots of directions. So joining the dots of data becomes one of the biggest challenges that faces our industry, because it's easier to get it wrong than get it right. And I find a lot of the time I'm working with people saying, yeah, we've concluded this. And I'm going, well, I'm not sure I agree with that. You know, I want to challenge that. And why programmatic is the future, actually, I think, and I'm a great fan of this, is, I mean, is it already developing a share of actually, you know, mobile massively? For me, it's better targeting. And better targeting means less offensiveness. It means better relevance. It means that I know who I'm really talking to. It's funny, when you come into the ad industry, they say, it's all about understanding the consumer and the media. And then usually within 5 minutes, that doesn't seem to apply anymore. Briefs still have things like ABC1. Well, if you write an ABC1 on a brief, evidently you don't understand an audience, because that's just nobody. So I think for our point of view as creatives, it means that we have to be more and more in tune with the customer. We have to understand that when we're doing a creative message, we really understand who we're talking to. But so many messages are just generic. They just throw them out there and hope that people might like it. Relevance, the oldest thing of advertising, as everyone said, if it's not relevant, it's not going to be interesting. And so if we're not relevant, you know, now here's it interesting. With direct marketing, when they did a big test of junk mail, you know, at one point, mail got to be the ultimate junk. They looked at direct mail and discovered that the things that people liked and thought were desirable, like the Screwfix catalogue, guys said, well, that's not junk mail, that's interesting. How many people like Screwfix catalogues here? I do. A lot of guys. How many girls like Screwfix catalogues? Not one. So, you know, when we find it relevant or interesting, we say that's not junk. When we don't find it relevant, it's junk. And it's the same with advertising. If it's not relevant, 9 times out of 10, we think it's bad. Yeah, we like good advertising. Respect your consumer. Nobody likes a pushy salesman. And this is the danger of using technology like a pushy salesman. Just because you can reach somebody doesn't mean you can. I was in an Indian restaurant having spoken at a conference a couple of years ago, and I was a journalist, and this guy came over and said, how are you, where are you from? I said, London. I said, oh, my brother lives in London. He runs a double glazing company. I said, oh, wonderful. 5 minutes later, he came back and gave me a brochure on double glazing and spent 5 minutes selling me double glazing while I was trying to have my dinner. You know, it's about wrong place, wrong time. But there was an opportunity. He saw an opportunity. But I said to my friend, oh my God, that really annoys me. She said, why? That's what you do every day of the week. Yeah, and there's a truism in that, isn't there? Yeah. I didn't buy the double glazing, by the way, but I took some extra mints. The power of creativity. Now, I know people have said this morning, creativity is, you know, very powerful. I asked a load of people out on email and sent around and said, what's the most popular campaign for different medias? And I couldn't get anybody to come back with one for mobiles at the moment. But I've got, you know, this one, most popular in the public, was this one. This is top of the charts. It's the most popular. You know, and it started as a TV campaign. It's gone viral. Everybody still loves it. This one's one of the most popular, and we all know how that's changed that market completely. You know, people love kiddie characters, actually. And this one is one of the most successful campaigns for safety in the world. It's also one of the most viewed campaigns online. It's got some unbelievable number of views globally. You know, and it's a kids-like cartoon, you know, but it's hugely entertaining. I showed it to a graduate yesterday who'd never seen it, and she was like, wow, that is amazing. You know, if advertising like that, I want to be in advertising, she said. You know, so, yeah, this are the fun things you can have, but at the moment, we're not using mobile creatively enough. We're not using it well enough. We're just using sort of hand-me-downs. And the challenge is it's a very small space to be in. You know, and if you read the Ad Age report on mobiles, it does say our biggest challenge is actually the space itself. And for me as a creative, it's an enormous challenge. You know, if you wanted a banner ad on a mobile to be as impactful as 48 sheet, it would have to be half the size of Big Ben. You know, so I haven't got size to work with, so I've got to be doubly clever. And that's why I think it's good for creatives, because we like to solve problems. I always say to a client that media and targeting is like the X factor. If this is the X factor, it's got me to the stage. What I do next is what the creativity does. So if I'm standing here and I go, hi there, Simon, hi, what are you going to do? And nothing. I'm just going to tell you I'm here. Yeah, I'm not going to get a vote. But if I do the most amazing performance, I get the vote and I get shortlisted and maybe I'll win X factor. And that is exactly how advertising works. Targeting of 30% gets you there, but what you do next is the winner or the break. And if you always say to your clients, think X factor, they'll start to understand why it's important to invest in good creativity. The old principles of AIDA haven't changed a bit. We still need to adopt that, which is get attention, get interest, get design, get action. I mean, that hasn't changed since 1932, I think, when they first wrote it. Still the cornerstone of our industry, you know. So you do need to sort of still work on those principles. It's not just about being there. And there is this thing about off mobile versus on mobile, you know, things like BLE and NFC. The fact now that it may be that you're not targeting the individual when they're actually in the space. It could be just as much that what you're doing is you're asking them to go to the mobile. So BLE obviously requires people to have an app, and it can obviously work very well for those who like it, and it has some fantastic uses. But it can also be used very badly. And in fact, one of the founders of it said his worry was being used badly. If you look at augmented reality, that's another fantastic use of mobiles that has gone past the gimmick stage, is now being used in America in far more interesting ways, like navigating supermarkets, then allow brands to be in that space. Some really clever stuff being done on AR, the next generation on, that allows for advertising. I mean, obviously, NFC is being put into Apple at last, although it's not being used, and it's only been used for payments. But interesting enough, in America, if you haven't read about this, Currency, I read a thing on Brand Republic the other week on it, is challenging Apple, which is run by all the big supermarkets and big retailers, because they don't want to give their data away to Apple. It's not about the money, it's about the data. So there's an enormous battle going on in the marketplace about data and payment. That's a completely separate discussion point. But it's a very interesting dynamic, and economic dynamic as well, that's happening. And then we've got NFC, which for me is, I think, one of the greatest ones. The reason I love NFC is because it's empowerment to the consumer. The consumer chooses to seek information. It supplies information. Now, if I'm walking around a store, rather than being pounded with messages, I can choose to tap and find out about how that product was made, how much that cost, what extra elements there are, how much stock they've got. So it's a very empowering technology. But the point is, you start by messaging the person on conventional methodologies, like in-store or on posters outside, which is a great use of it. And then you can actually get people to go on the mobile. So you're triggering them to use the mobile in a positive way. Not necessarily doing the opposite way, which is geo-targeting. And there's lots and lots of uses you can use for NFC. And of course, there was a similar one, which is QR codes, which started off in Korea. They did it in one of the airports in the UK for Tesco's, which is a very clever, novel way that showed that people quite like the idea of using the phone to just shop using images. It's a great way of showing how the mobile phone can go the next stage on. And basically, summary, to sum up, because my time's going to run out. The future of media mobile. This is a big one that was being debated as well. Is programmatic going to be the death of some of the media buyers? Will it mean that we don't need media buyers anymore? Someone described it recently as Uber versus taxis. You know, unless the taxis get to the future and start using technology, they're going to be redundant. So it is the case, the more people embrace technologies, the more they'll become the new Uber. And I think programmatic is very much like the new Uber. You know, it's a great way of looking at it. And the thing I always say at the end of a conference is, we talk about a lot of technologies. It's a bit like music. People say, oh, this is a new trend in music. But all the old stuff is still selling. People are still buying old stuff. They still buy prog rock, actually. And basically, just to sum up, when Palmer says be careful that everything's going to change, it doesn't. It just gets more for us to work with. So when someone says, for example, paper will be a thing of the past, just remember there is absolutely no app for that. So the old stays. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris.